We will study a test lesson with Rabash. We're going to be reading from Tes, Volume 1, Part 4. We are in the answers to topics, item 99.
To understand that, Rav says you don't have a light that doesn't have inner and surrounding light. Meaning, since each light has to come through coupling of striking, what is coupling of striking? That he has a screen and he says, I want to receive only what I can aim in order to bestow. Turns out, accordingly, comes the inner light. By being able to use in order to bestow with great coarseness. Why can it use a lot of coarseness? That even from the degree of keter, you can say, I don't want to receive more than that. Turns out that there's great surrounding light by what? By the greatest limitation. Now, let's say afterwards in the coarseness of phase 3, what does it mean that there's degree of chokhmah there? Since in internality he uses less. In internality there's not so much limitation over keter, only over chokhmah. Turns out that the surrounding light is also smaller. In phase 2, let's say the same thing. It uses what it can clothe with inner light. What it cannot clothe, that's surrounding light. So they are opposite to each other. One appears through the coarseness and the other stays outside by the screen. So, turns out they're always according to the degree. That's what he says here in item 92. The measure and the entire being of the inner light depend on the measure of the coarseness and detainment in the screen. That's the rule. There's a level of coarseness that he can use in order to bestow, and there is a force of detainment where he doesn't want to receive more. By this detainment of the screen, then as surrounding light is rejected and remains outside the parzuf because of these detainment and coarseness in the screen. And in the screen, thus, the accumulation of coarseness distances the surrounding light according to its measure. What does it mean, the greater coarseness, what he can use in order to bestow? It follows, it distances the surrounding light and intensifies the inner light and brings it closer according to its measure. Turns out they're total opposites from one end to the other. In short, we need to say this. Since we see two things in regards to the screen, one part can overcome in order to bestow, and he uses coarseness. And another part, what he cannot overcome, there is a screen over that, a limitation that he doesn't want to receive. Turns out the surrounding light depends on limitation. The inner light depends on what? Not limitation, on the contrary, the clothing. That's why they're opposite to each other. This depends on clothing, what one can aim in order to bestow, and this one depends on the detainment force. So it turns out there's two opposite forces in the screen. Now, let's say the screen itself. What is the screen? It uses a part of the coarseness. And first, if he can use a part of the coarseness of phase 4, and on phase 4, he can say, I don't receive more than that. It turns out that what he stops receiving beyond the degree of Keter is called surrounding light. So the surrounding light is related to what? To limitation. What does it depend on? The inner light, it depends on the clothing of reflected light. So it turns out these are two opposite actions. So there's a part where he says, I do receive, that's inner light, and there's a part where he says, I don't receive, that's surrounding light. So that's what he means, but by them being opposite to each other. Since in the screen, in the coupling by striking, there's a part there that can clothe and a part that doesn't want to clothe, that limits it, the force of detainment. Then the inner light depends on how much clothing of reflected light. The surrounding light depends on the limitation force of the screen. If so, this one relates to one thing, the other one relates to another thing. So the surrounding light wants to cancel the limitation. 93. Who overpowers in the striking of inner light and surrounding light? Inner and surrounding lights are clashing with each other. Where does it start? Where does it start? When it says to begin with? First, the inner light certainly overpowers, as the first 9 Sefirot clothed there in the reflected light of the screen. In actuality, it remained so even after the departure, as there is no absence in the spiritual. Afterwards, the surrounding light overpowered the inner light until it completely refined the screen and equalized its form with the emanator, meaning to Malchut of the Rosh, where the inner light and surrounding light are connected together. There it received strength until the second expansion emerged from it on downward, called Partzuf Ab. We want to know, he follows the words of the Rav. The words of the Rav are as follows. Since they are both connected at the Peh, where there was a single organ, what does it mean they're both connected? What and when were they separated? We should interpret as follows. His desire to do good to the created beings, that light went down and produced 4 phases of direct light. And there, when we say coupling by striking at the Rosh, that a part is going to be received in order to bestow as inner light, that's called inner light, and another part where he cannot aim, he will not receive that. This is called surrounding light. But this division was not yet in practice, because he didn't receive anything where I can say that now he's not receiving. So both of them were in potential. What are they together? There was still no difference between inner light and surrounding light. Why? As they all came to one discernment. His will to benefit the created beings, created phase 4, called the will to receive in order to receive, and then he didn't receive it due to the restriction, and then equalized himself as much as he could receive in order to bestow. That's what is going to receive, and what he cannot aim in order to bestow, he won't receive. So this stays in inner light and that stays in surrounding light. Therefore, when they come out of the peh, where the separation begins, so who appears first? Who appears first, inner light or surrounding light? Inner light, we learn. From peh downwards, there's inner light until it comes to the tabul, and the inner light limits it thus far. Then the surrounding light also wants to shine. So we say, then the surrounding light overpowers and the inner light departs. What does it mean the inner light departs? Its limitation departs. Again, why does the inner light depart? Because it can no longer limit what he wants to not receive it. So he lacks that limitation. So the inner light also departs. In truth, the coupling by striking, what is the coupling by striking that we're learning? That he doesn't want to receive, that will be rejected at the Rosh of the degree. But what? There he didn't receive anything yet. That's why we say they're bonded to each other. When is there a discernible separation in the guf? But where did it start? In Malchut of Rosh. It turns out, who overpowers first? First, the inner light overpowers and expands. Then, after the inner light revealed its limitation to the Malchut of Tabu, then the surrounding light rejects what the surrounding light departs. Then it turns out he starts talking about the Malchut of Rosh until they both belong, they return to the same degree as they were in potential, not in practice. He didn't receive anything, he doesn't have anything, they go back upwards to the Malchut of Rosh. And he says here in item 93, first, the inner light certainly overpowers. When does it start? It actually starts in the Rosh, where he says part yes and part no. So, after what he said, that the screen overpowered the light, and he said he's not going to receive anymore, and it started expanding, then the surrounding light overpowered and canceled it. And what is he saying? First, the inner light certainly overpowers as the first 9 Sefirot clothed there in the reflected light of the screen in actuality. And it was there in potential at the Rosh. It remained so even after the departure. This clothing remained, as there's no absence in the spiritual. Afterwards, the surrounding light overpowered the inner light, since it doesn't let him shine until it completely refined the screen. That it canceled the whole screen. What was the end? And equalized its form with the emanator, meaning to Malchut of the Rosh, where he was the emanator in potential, and then that's called the emanator in practice, where the inner light and the surrounding light are connected together, where there's no difference yet in what he receives in practice and what he doesn't receive in practice. And we say there, the screen is constant. Why is the screen constant there? Because there's no actual clothing there yet. There it received strength from the screen until the second expansion emerged from it downward, called Parzuf Ab. Once again it emerges in the coupling by striking between the inner light and surrounding light.
94. Who overpowers in the striking of the record and the descending reflected light? So we need to know two things. What is the record? What is reflected light? Or the descending reflected light? Let's see what's written inside. During the coupling, in the upper phase, the reflected light that descends from there into the empty vessel overpowers the record that is present there in the empty vessel. Although the record is much greater than the descending reflected light, since the record is after the departure of her coupling, and the descending reflected light is extended from the illumination of the coupling, it overpowers her. Who? The light that comes from the coupling. Then, when the screen is refined from the upper phase too, and the coupling departs from there as well, let's say from phase 3, the record returns to phase 4 and overpowers the descending reflected light, which is upon phase 3, meaning the sparks that fell into her vessel. Then the record descends into her vessel once more. In the beginning, revokes the power of the sparks, until afterwards they are renewed once more in the second expansion. What's written here? There are two things. One, let's start with phase 4 as an example. The vessels that remain in the light, that remain with light that illuminates in phase 4, the light departs from them, the records remain, so they want to attain the record. And then a coupling is performed on phase 3, which is called nekudot, or reflected light. And before the next light fills the empty vessels. Hence, in the reflected light that emerges from the striking of the coupling of striking upon phase 3 descends to the vessel of coarseness of phase 4. It wants to illuminate there. So phase 4, the records does not want to receive it. Why? They're contradicted to one another. There's above the record, which is phase 4, which remained in a higher degree. And there is a certain measure of phase 3, which is not a record, but it's only a light that comes from the coupling. What is done by this clash? So part called sparks have fallen and exited this light of the descending reflected light and descends to the vessel that has phase 4. So who overcame? The sparks that came from the illumination of this coupling overcame the record. The record is called what remains of what was left from the coupling. That's one. Yes.
Why only the sparks descend? Why not the whole light of phase 3?
That he calls sparks. That which has fallen by this, that light is called sparks. Why are they called sparks? It's just like you're saying, all the descending reflected light, why does it give sparks? So we need to understand what the meaning of sparks is. Sparks are called that it illuminates now and later is extinguished. This is how he explains this. What did we learn? Who overcame? The light that came by the coupling. What happened after that? Also, phase 3 was refined. And what illuminates now? Phase 2. We learn what is there in these sparks? Only records remained. The coupling departed. It's now called phase 2. Therefore, where there is now, what is there now? The record of phase 4 overcomes the sparks of the records of phase 3. That's called that they're extinguished.
No, that's not what's called sparks.
There are two records. So the record that includes phase 4 descended. That's what he's saying in the line that begins with coupling. Then when the screen is refined, you see the screen. What is the meaning here? From the upper phase to, and the coupling departs from there as well. The record returns of phase 4 and overpowers the descending reflected light, meaning the sparks that fell into her vessel.
The records.
Since the sparks that don't have more than a record now, all the light departed from phase 3, and the previous record that overcomes, since it's a record of phase 4 closer to the record from phase 3, then the record descends into her vessel once more, as in the beginning. And what do they cancel? They revoke the power of the sparks. Therefore, it's called sparks, since they don't illuminate in the vessel now. Just like a spark that illuminates for a moment and is extinguished. If so, what's the benefit of these sparks? Until afterwards, they are renewed once more in the second expansion. We say, what is the second expansion? The Partzuf Ab. What happened here? The sparks from the level of Chokhmah have fallen to the vessel of Keter. He says this is a preparation in the second expansion where there was the light of Chokhmah in the vessel of Keter. It received a preparation from here, from these sparks that have fallen to the vessel of the record on the level of Keter. This is where he says here, until afterwards, they are renewed once more, these sparks of Chokhmah in the vessel of Keter, where the light of Chokhmah truly comes. Where is the light of Chokhmah truly coming? In the Partzuf of Ab, in the vessel of Keter. It turns out that the sparks renew that level.
Now, when there was a coupling over the
He says
phase,
this way, each degree illuminates from the lower phase, no more. Therefore, he says, 2 illuminates for 3, no more. From 3 to 4.
why not better than the light of 2 than the records of 4?
That means 1 minute we'll have 1 degree, and there's a difference between 2 degrees. It's not so hard. It's okay, it's the same thing. 2 and 3, yes. What is he asking?